Different social media platforms have slowly started to take over the lives of people of every age all over the world, seemingly becoming a part of everyday life, particularly for the young people who spent a huge proportion of their lives relying on the security it provides. However, this is starting to cause some pretty serious issues when it comes to young people being able to live their lives genuinely. When everything is blurred behind a screen, how do we know when the line between a trend and reality has been crossed? I've spoken to Sarah Silver, a teacher who specialises in special educational needs teaching, to see how she thinks social media has started affecting her students. Okay. So, after having worked with children for 28 years, have you seen any significant change in children's mental health since social media has become popular?
Yes, I have, but I don't believe it's the only factor impacting on the increase of mental health issues. Social media platforms can be very positive for helping students to improve their communication skills, make friends, and have fun. But obviously there is the negative side that if they're using it persistently, it can have an impact on their rates of anxiety, depression, and sleep. But most children secondary school age will now have a smartphone and will be using at least one, if not more, of those platforms. Research has suggested that some platforms have more of a negative impact due to how much it's based on visual presentation, and bearing in mind that children are going through quite a critical period of their development and are unsure on so many issues that making those comparisons to images online can obviously have and through persistent use can have negative impacts.
So, similarly, have you seen an increase in diagnoses for certain mental health issues?
Good question. So yes, I definitely have, which is ironic because a new code of practice came out for special educational needs that was making quite a concerted effort to move away from labelling of conditions to actually meeting individual needs. There are obviously delays now with the impact of COVID on individuals being able to get to CAMHS to actually get assessments and diagnosis. I think waiting times at the moment for an autistic diagnosis is something like 2.5 years. And whilst, for some people, having a label and an understanding of why they behave the way they can be very helpful, but it's also around helping to support them with the strategies to cope on a day-to-day basis. That's also, really important. Yeah.
So, how has the pandemic affected these diagnoses or the mental health?
So I think students have had an incredibly difficult time being homeschool educated, particularly during lockdown, where individuals weren't able to socialise. It's meant that a lot of the communication was happening online. And as I sort of stated before, these social network platforms, it's not reality. You do not have a true representation of the individuals. They aren't necessarily authentic. They could be more performance based. So I think that the long-term impact of children's mental health is going to be seen for many years to come, if not decades, and particularly for younger children in those really critical years of sort of speech and language development. Again, having been socially isolated is going to be incredibly difficult. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride. I think it's going to be a case where money is going to have to be invested, as it is being to a certain extent, in education and health and social care, to be fair, to respond to the unmet needs that they have had during this difficult time. As far as diagnosis is concerned, as I said previously, there is a massive delay on young people being able to have timely intervention to address mental health conditions or even get them diagnosed.
So, where do you stand with the belief that social media is causing young people to glamorise serious mental health issues?
Well, I should firstly say that I am not on any platforms because I am old. But having said that, sadly, there is some glamorisation of mental health issues. Where it's good, platforms are being used to increase awareness and destigmatise. But there's a fine line between destigmatising and glamorising. And, I am aware of influencers using glamorous terms like anxiety queen or anxiety princess, and even selling clothing as profit on the back of mental health issues. And I think it's really important to say people do not choose to have a mental health issue. They, that is not a lifestyle choice. And that is a very slippery slope to be going down. And I think that there's some responsibility from the actual platform governors, as it were, to actually ensure that that's not happening. I think it also, is reflective of the fact that if you're a vulnerable teenager who's going onto a social media platform and you want to be included, that you will then perhaps try and find a label to align yourself to. However, being sad does not mean you're clinically depressed. Being nervous does not mean you have a clinical anxiety disorder. So I think it's about that education, particularly in schools, where we are informing children around what mental health is. Mental health is like your physical health. It can vary and change throughout your life. And I think it's about that education back in schools to ensure that they are informed and aware so that their usage on these platforms can be a positive experience.
Okay, so then following on from that, do you then believe that being mentally ill has become a trend on social media?
I think that there are pockets of that. I don't believe... Say the question again, please.
So, do you believe that becoming mentally ill or having a mental illness is becoming trendy or is becoming a trend?
Yeah, so I think the bit that threw me there was a mental illness through self-diagnosis. So it's not that they are clinically getting a diagnosis, it's that they're going onto these platforms and aligning themselves when perhaps there isn't actually a clinical diagnosis, which again can be dangerous. People do go through periods of being very sad. People do go through periods of being very nervous and possibly anxious, but that doesn't mean that they have a mental health issue. And I think it's also around PSHE programs in school, helping to build that resilience, that bounce back. But as I said, if you've got vulnerable children accessing platforms that have a predisposition to a mental health condition, then there has to be some responsibility taken by the influencers online that are, in the story. The other thing to say is that, it's great that a lot of celebrities have come out and shared their own mental health issues. But, a very rich celebrity in Hollywood sharing their story is not the same as a potential teenager in a deprived area. The celebrity will be able to pick up the phone and be able to have a one-to-one therapeutic session as often or as frequently as necessary. A child in a deprived area could be waiting, as we've already said, for months, if not years, to be seen by a CAMHS NHS professional, and they won't have the disposable income to be able to pay for that privately. So some of the stories are, again, can be a little bit misleading over their own experience compared to that of Bob Average, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Talking to Sarah has really opened my eyes about how professionals and older people view the hold social media has on the younger generation. But I also really feel that I had to speak to a young person to see whether these changes are obvious among the youth as well. Thankfully, I managed to talk to Chloe Archer, a 20-year-old student who studies criminology at Plymouth University, hoping to see if she could possibly shed some light on the situation. How would you describe your experience with social media?
My experience with social media has been relatively positive because I haven't actually had any issues, but I do know a lot of people who've had issues with bullying, with issues with self-harm and depression, and I do know a lot of people that have got into the sort of drug scene within social media, with the posting and being able to buy and sell online. Personally, I haven't really fallen into that, but it is quite prevalent around people my age.
Okay. So then would you say that social media is a significant influence in your life?
Yes, I would say that social media is probably one of the main parts in my life, aside from obviously the working and the education, because it just fills a void. It's become so normalised in society that we just take it in as it's media content, isn't it? It's just like the news.
Okay. So as a young person, how have you seen the increase in social media's popularity affect either yours or your friends' mental health?
I personally have had some issues relating to body image and things along the lines of weight and how you should look and the colour of your hair, what you should dress like, how you should present yourself to the world. And I know that people who are similar ages to me have had the same issues. I have a few friends who have had issues with those sort of fitness trend models who present themselves as this really put together, well-to-do person, but is actually generally just quite fake.
Fair enough. So leading on from that, do you think that social media negatively or positively affects different groups of people in different ways?
I actually do. I think that I think for some people it can be positive because there are a lot of accounts out there that will change your life. It will show you how to eat properly. If you're not really taking care of yourself, there are a lot of things on social media and sort of platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok that will show you how to change your diet, change your lifestyle, and just to make sure everything in your life is, as it should be. But I do think there are a lot of negative things out there that, such as Pro-Ana, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's essentially a pro-anorexia forum on these social media platforms that promote eating disorders. I think there's positive and negatives, but I think if we're going to take it as a whole, I would say that social media is probably more negative in that sort of area.
Yeah, okay. And so lastly, do you see certain things like mental health disorders becoming a trend on different platforms?
So as I previously spoke about the Pro-Ana thing, it became a trend. I saw a hashtag Pro-Ana account, which was it's just crazy because you see people promoting these body standards.
After talking to our interviewees, we can clearly see that there are some serious issues when it comes to social media affecting young people's mental health. But when all children see on their For You pages or their Instagram feeds are videos like these, how can we be surprised? How are we supposed to know whether or not these are a cry for help or just a trend?